Hey everybody, we're gonna continue our Q&A session from the last session. And so let's go ahead and do the next question. I think we're taking questions in chat, but if you want, you can unmute and raise your hand and we'll
Yeah.
answer your question.
Go ahead, Lavanya.
Hey, hey.
Mhm. Hello. Okay. So following the other question, I was wondering, so if most of the situations in life, like, many of the times they are repetitive situations, whether the similar situation keeps occurring, keeps occurring, but different settings.
Right.
And then how do you really know why it's happening? And if we are trying, probably we are interpreting the same way. Like, for example, there is a situation where you feel, for example, rejected or hurt or,
Mhm.
felt like disrespected. And then this situation keeps happening. And and the way we interpret what's happening outside is always the same. And now because of the meditation that we are doing, we go even a step back and observe what we are
Mhm.
observing and also how we are perceiving the observing. And how do we break the loop by paying attention to particular center? So how do we not
Actually,
have,
the observation itself is the therapy. Like
okay,
because if you look at, you kind of said it, like it keeps happening over and over again. And so in the mind, we see it as intellect. The intellectual mind or the everyday mind is very repetitive and it maintains things and it just does things over and over again. Like it's not really that open to new experiences. And then in your body, it's homeostasis. Your body tries to maintain a certain level of balance that it just tries to keep doing the same thing over and over again and strive for comfort. And so really when you boil it down, it's the play between essence and form. Form is always going to be repetitive in nature. The so be it that it's in our body or it's a old memory, it's a old event, it's a thing that's in our mind, it's a pattern out in the world. It's the play between yin and yang or essence and form. And form is always going to be repetitive, be it that it's inside of us or outside of us. And the thing that changes form is essence. And when we observe something, we really don't have to like figure it out or make something happen. The essence is qualitative in nature and produces a shift or change that's much greater than its size, And so if we start to bring intuition into any situation, be it our body, our emotions, our thoughts, or something external like a pattern in our life, the observation itself is starting to bring in that white light. It's starting to surround us by the light, and it's starting to bring something that's new or different rather than the repetitive part. And so, the more that we can go through and in the face of a difficulty or an old trauma or a pattern that has been causing us suffering over and over again, by sitting with awareness and observing it, it allows for something different to happen. It allows for something spontaneous to happen. And in that, we start to like the intuitive mind is the part that learns and the part that innovates and the part that like goes, okay, we've been doing this over and over again. Let's do something different and steps out and away from it. Intellect might want it, but intellect always does repetition. Even if it comes up with a new idea, it's just a new way of looking at the same thing over and over again. And so in that spontaneous where, you know, I would say for me, This sounds weird, and it goes back to the practice of holding something in your heart and like how we do that journey in the heart, you know, where we keep going a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And there's this seed that is in the physical heart that's associated with the soul. And it's referred to as the seed of destiny. It's like the physical blueprint of our body and our life. And it's also tied to like the destiny, the things that are going to happen kind of no matter what. You know, there's the things that happen because we choose things and, you know, where we live, but then there's things that they're going to happen no matter what, you know. And when you go deeper and deeper into this area and this seed, you know, you begin to experience things that are in complete opposition of each other, yet they're both true. Like, you know, one time a student said, you know, we went into that area and they said, I feel like I'm in a room, but there are no walls, you know. So, you know, if you look at that, it's like, okay, there's the sensation of a room, but a room has walls. But then I'm in this open space, but I still feel like I'm in a room, I'm in a place, you know. And you know, the more that we can tap into that aspect of having two things that are in complete opposition but are true, that is a practice of the heart. Like that is going deeper into the heart. And you know, when we see these things in our lives where there is difficulty or a pattern, you know, as we begin to observe them, something does happen. Something begins to shift. And, you know, it's very different than the way our intellectual mind sees it. There's the intellectual mind feels it all right in the moment. And it's like, it's right here, right now. And it's going to be this way forever. Like, you know, because it is of repetition, you know, it's just repeating. So it's like, I need to do something about this because if I don't, I'm going to feel this way forever. Where, you know, intuition is a little bit more like watching clouds. Like, oh, look, I see a reindeer. Oh, it turned into a dragon. Oh, it turned into this. And then it just kind of breaks up and floats away. You know, that is the nature of intuition. And it's how we break up thoughts and thought forms. It's how we break up patterns in our life. And it's also how we learn. You know, how we learn is through the intuitive mind. And so the more that we observe these patterns with not really having the intention, I'm going to relax this, I'm going to release this, I'm going to break down, I'm going to get away from it. I would say, um, in the old days, I used to set intentions for things like, oh, I intend for this to be healed. And I started finding that even that was a little bit of a stumbling block. I just would then start kind of observing things. And, you know, I was just sharing this a couple of days ago with some students. And, you know, for me, I would say that the big turning point, and this is going to sound weird, so I'm going to explain it, but when all of those things started to really shift, like past traumas and past events and patterns in my life, and I gave up. Like I completely gave up. And you know, I would love to say that I was being super wise and I was seeing it from a higher point of view, but I was just tired. I mean, I was
Yeah.
just so tired. And in that giving up, I was just like, there's nothing I can do. Like, and in that, I was able to allow for something to happen. You know, it was even that intellectual piece of like, I need to make this go away. You know, what I was giving up, I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was giving up was still the intellect trying to get its way. I was trying to manifest something different. I was trying to make something go away or get better or improve or shift or change. And I kind of just exhausted myself in doing it. And then I was like, I give up. And then in that moment, the observation came in. Like I had stopped trying. And in that, all of a sudden, there was potential for new things to start happening. And, looking back, I was like, oh, that makes sense with what we know about intuition. But when you're in it in the moment, it's like it's really hard because there's so much of a drive of our body and there's so much of a drive of our mind that, in certain spiritual practices, they give you just busy work where they just try to break that part of you down so that at some point you go, okay, I give up. And in that is like the teaching moment or that fork in the road where you start going into the different direction. And the more that we can turn on the observer in any given situation, in the face of any pattern in our lives, be it that it's from this life or past life or from our family or, whatever it is, we have the potential to shift it or break free of it or break out of that cage that's held us in that holding pattern for so long.
Thank you. And one more, what if your body starts moving at one point? Like, do you
Like it
control
starts
that?
kind of twitching or
Yeah, the twirling,
I would just observe it. Sometimes that could be nervous tension in the body, and sometimes as you start to expand, sometimes your body will get like a little jump or a little shift. Yeah, yeah, that's okay.
and are there any significance between the thoughts that come on the right side of your head to the left side of your head? Sometimes I notice if a thought comes on the right
I
side of
I
my
would
head.
I would just observe them, like because even the idea of observing the body, the body is easier to observe than the emotions, and then the emotions are easier to observe than the mind. And so, whatever starts to arise in the mind, each side of the brain does have like its thoughts and whatever. And I would say I would just observe them because we're even trying to get past the thoughts and start being able to observe the essence to a much greater degree. And it's like we got to get used to observing the body, and then we got to get used to observing the emotions. And the emotions are much more subtle than the body. And then the thoughts are much more subtle than the emotions. And then essence is much more subtle than the thoughts. And so I would say the key is just to keep observing the thoughts. They'll arise, sometimes they'll linger, sometimes they'll float away. And then as a little bit of time goes by, there starts to be greater and greater levels of expansion. Then there's even kind of like deeper states, deeper insight or deeper experiences that you start to have that aren't really tied to the body. And just to be able to experience those and observe those and then kind of as you come back into your normal everyday mind, to bring that forth. Yeah.
At some point, we want to act on a thought, right? Like a thought like, oh, I need to do this, or you should do this. A brain says that. And then I notice that if I follow up on a thought that comes on the right side, it leads me into trouble. But right side is the most creative mind, correct? Like, it should be the intuitive
Yeah.
one.
There's different qualities of uh intuition, the intuitive mind. And so at first it might be more of instinctual drives. And so instinct doesn't have it's a reaction that is not processed by the brain or by the emotions. And so I mean there are whole practices about cleaning up the intuitive mind and just again observing it. You're just always observing whichever arises. You're just observing it because even intuition isn't like as soon as you tap into it, it's the ultimate. Like you kind of still have to keep refining that part as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Well, very good questions.
Would Greg repeat the three deity energies associated with April, May, and June full moons?
Yeah, the one in April was associated with Christ. The one that we just had on Monday was the Buddha, and then in June it's the hierarchy of all the higher beings. Yeah.
Brother Greg, it comes to mind a picture that quite ago the Divine Lord manifested to me with a hand, and it was in my spirit. It was the hand of Christ pointed to me in a huge blackboard writing with white chalk, the Lord's Prayer in English. I learned to pray the Lord's Prayer by that moment. I was not a dream. What do you think about this experience? Thanks to the teacher us the philosophy of esoterics of Buddha's teachings. I am fascinated with mystery of life since that I was at a very young age. I love to meditate. It brings me so much strength and focus to deal with my trials and tribulations. It has been more than one can handle. My gratitude to learn from your teachings appreciated very much.
Um, Very good dream, by the way. When that appears, my experience with it, and there's actually talismans that have uh, that picture of like a hand and a little bit of an arm, and they're writing something. And my experience with that is that there comes a point where maybe a couple of things could be happening. One is that a karma has been like you've worked through something. Like I hesitate to say paid off because it's more about how you think rather than what it is you're thinking about. And so when we make a deep enough shift, there's almost like a rewriting of like the destiny or the karmic issue or pattern, or you're being shown like how to shift that. It is a gift, and that you were shown the Lord's Prayer. If you look at what the Lord's Prayer is, the Lord's Prayer is a kind of um, creative destruction. You're breaking down like a tendency that's either in the body or in the mind, or it could even be like a karmic thing that arises. And by going through and doing that practice and breaking it down, you're making space for like your true nature or light to come in. And so I would say you were being guided to help rewrite like a momentum that has been going on in the life to a certain degree. And it is about, elevating yourself at some point. And so when you're shown something like that, it sounds like you've taken it very serious and you should. That is a very serious, serious dream. I've only known of a few people that have had that dream. Yeah, but very, 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 very potent. And so, if you were shown the Lord's Prayer, I would say that's a daily practice for you. You know, um, even more than daily. Like
I need to clarify, wasn't my first language English?
Mhm.
That's the most
Yeah. Yeah, whatever language you are shown, like I would, doesn't have to be in that language, but I would say, if you were shown the Lord's Prayer, I would do the Lord's Prayer. Yeah.
Two questions. What does the copper bracelet do? What does the copper ankh do?
So the copper bracelets, like, it could be like a chain, or like here I use these that are like so, and I just clip them on before. But a lot of times when I'm doing like mantra or prayer or something like that, copper helps to open up the channels. So it helps energy to flow. And so if you're doing mantra or blessing, when I put these on, it increases the amount,
Yeah,
there you go. They just kind of clip on there. And then when you start to bless, it increases the amount that comes in. And especially as you bless, you're increasing your ability to be a vessel of white light. And by blessing, for one, you're concretizing light out into the world, but also you're displacing lower vibrational energies in your body. So it's a kind of purification. And so like copper here, copper around the neck, the copper around the neck, a necklace or a little clip or something, it helps to open up the amount of energy that comes down into the head. And so the use of the bracelets is a way to increase the amount of light that is passing through you. you know Even like if you take a salt bath, to purify the body, if you add a little bit of copper, it's actually more purifying because more energy runs through the body, the channels open up, and so more comes out. It allows for more to come in and more to go out. Then the use of the copper ankh is about gathering up the light that is, associated with our higher faculties, and anchoring it down into the area below our feet. And, part is we go through and we're talking about like the trauma loops and observation, and how do we break out of these patterns. If you think about what Kundalini energy is, it's a coiled energy that's very dense and impacted. And part of how we break out of these patterns is we bring light in, and it keeps breaking down this impacted, coiled energy, right? It's very dense. And so it keeps pecking on it, pecking on it, pecking on it. And so what happens is that begins to open up, and then things begin to manifest, both good and the things that are patterns in our life. But the patterns are not just the patterns, they're in the coil, like they're in that um, coiled energy. And so that is also manifest down below our feet. All the different things that we do, you could say manifest below our feet, the good and the not so good. So the more light that we bring in, the more that it releases that light below our feet and starts to change the pattern, starts to change our body, starts to change our emotions and our mind. And so if you think about, like in different traditions, they say things like Amen or Amen or Omon, Amen Ra. It's very, very similar. And in the Hindu and Buddhist traditions, they'll say Hum, or sometimes we'll chant Om, instead of Om, we'll say Om, right? All of these are variations of the same thing, and they release light out of your feet down into the earth. And it has like a a purifying effect, but it also helps us to like evolve, like we're evolving out of something. You know how we're talking about the intuition being the point of how we evolve out of things. Well, it's not just that the intuition and the mind does something. We got to get it in the body and we got to release the light outside our feet. And as we release it out of our feet, we start evolving out of the patterns in our life and we start evolving out of the tendencies in our life. And the Ankh is a way to, it activates the heart and drives that energy down into the earth. Yeah.
One last question, how to stop feeling negative emotions in physical body? When observing, it feels very uncomfortable and also a bit scary. Sensations are quite strong and very physical in nature.
Yeah. Uh, there's no way to like make it go away other than observing. So I would say just, you know, start somewhere that feels comfortable enough and turn those juices on of the observation. And, you know, the observation starts to break you out of those repetitive ways of thinking. And so, you know, it's just little by little. So, you know, I think the stumbling block sometimes is we feel that we need to make something happen or that we're going to have to do something. And really, all you're doing is just observing, you know, and even though it might be a little bit intense for a moment or two, eventually it starts to dissipate and you begin to expand. The more that we go into our mind and we try to micromanage it, nothing happens. And sometimes it, you know, we just sit with the repetition of that uncomfortable feeling. You really just have to observe it and allow it to unfold. Well, thanks for doing this tonight, you guys. We had a great session and we'll be doing this more in the future. And I love your guys' questions. And some of you guys are having really amazing experiences. So thanks for being on the journey with us and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.